bring him on, and then I'll ask you, Michael Hiltzik, about a column you did that related to the Bay Area in San Francisco. He's Michael Hiltzik, everyone, writes the business column in the LA Times. We did attend the same university. We both graduated the same university. I like to think of myself as Pulitzer Prize adjacent. Let me ask you, Michael Hiltzik, first to comment on the Dominion settlement. You had many a column about this, and you actually opined. I wonder if you could share your thoughts.
Well, this is a very big number. I mean, let's face it. This is, as close as you can get to $1 billion settlement without it actually being $1 billion, but certainly close to 800 million. That's a lot of money, and it clearly suggests, or says out loud, that Fox was very nervous about having to put its star anchors on the stand and have them admit in public that they were liars. And the odd thing about this settlement is that it happened so late in the process, because the damage has already been done to Fox's credibility. The emails that Dominion was able to put on the record just over the last few months that were devastating.
I was making the point, Michael, that was surprising to me. If you're going to settle for that big a number, I mean, if that's in your pocket somewhere, why not settle prior to all of that stuff getting leaked? Or was it because they didn't expect it would be leaked?
Well, I think they knew that it was going to be disclosed, because they had provided it to the plaintiffs, that is Dominion.
But why then? Was it a leverage thing? They just wanted to see who would blink first, or what was going on?
Settlements of this size, settlements of this nature, they tend to happen at the 11th hour, or the 11th hour and the 59th minute, which is what this was. I mean, you really do need to be staring down the barrel of the gun before you flinch. But I think Fox management has come under a lot of criticism, from lawyers, not from, its many fans and non-fans, that it didn't really try to make this go away much more strongly before this moment. But it is, look, Fox's audience, its devoted audience, they're not going to be swayed by what they read.
Sure.
They're either too stupid or, don't care that they're being lied to consistently. Fox's critics, basically we've all learned, that we were right all along, not that there was any real doubt. The other aspect of this is that Fox does not have to make a public apology on the air. And I think that was very valuable to them, because there's another one of these lawsuits that's standing in the wings, and that's from Smartmatic, another voting machine company that has a $2.7 billion lawsuit against them. And I think one thing that people haven't really focused on, but maybe should, is that Dominion is owned by private equity investors. It's not a public company. It's not owned by a guy. And I think if you're owned by a private equity investors, those investors really are, they're probably pounding on the lawyers and pounding on the management to say, get this done. We just want the money. We don't really care about, any of this other stuff. Smartmatic is somewhat different. Smartmatic's got, owned and operated management. They may end up cutting a tougher deal, but we will see. $787.5 million. That's sort of a nice starting point if you're Smartmatic.
Yeah, I mean, and plus all of that evidentiary material that you can use in your case if you're Smartmatic. I wonder if you can remind us, Michael Hiltzik, where Fox gets all that money. They don't get it from the MyPillow advertisers and the commemorative coin advertisers that show up on Fox News Channel 24 hours a day. Where do they get to be this kind of company that can write that kind of check and still continue?
Right. Well, you're just feeding me a straight line, obviously, because you know that I wrote the column.
Yeah, you wrote a great column about it. Exactly.
That ran on Monday, just as the trial was supposed to get started. Fox does not. Fox makes much, much, much more money from what are known as carriage fees or affiliate fees, depending on you know uh, who's labeling them. These are the fees that cable systems pay to Fox to have the right to carry Fox News on their systems, and they're basically bundled together in the basic cable tier. If you are a subscriber to Comcast or Spectrum or whoever, you get Fox News whether you want it or not, and you pay for it whether you want it or not, or whether you watch it or not. And this is, sometimes 2 or 3 times as much money as Fox gets from sponsorships and advertising on Tucker Carlson and Laura Ingraham and what have you. In fact, they get so much money from these carriage fees that if their advertising revenue went to zero, they would still have an operating profit for their cable operations.
That's why
So
I thought, the various boycotts that have followed various Fox personalities, while good in terms of raising maybe the shame quotient, apart from that, they don't really do any damage to Fox News Channel.
no, what counts for Fox is the number of eyeballs that they have. Basically, it's actually the subscriptions. Uh, the subscriptions of the cable systems that carry Fox, um, something in the neighborhood of 75, 80 million subscribers who get their TV through a cable operation. And if maybe 3% of those people are actually devoted watchers of Fox, but Fox gets to count all of that whole universe in, and they charge something in the neighborhood of $2 per person per month, and that comes to $1.5 billion right there.
Uh, is there anything else on the Fox thing before I move on? I was going to ask you also to talk about the San Francisco case, which you also did a really great column on. We touched on some of this on the air here, as you might imagine, but if there's any, I feel as though we've pretty well tilled that soil of dominion. And as you've suggested, there are other lawsuits in the offing. There are also lawsuits in the offing for the various constellation of characters who were pushing this stuff. The Sidney Powells, Rudy Giuliani's, Mike Lindell's of the world, right?
That's right. Dominion's got lawsuits that are pending against them, but obviously they don't have the pockets as deep as Fox and News Corp have. So, maybe they can extract some sort of apologies or admissions from them, but it's not going to be a big number. Or even if there's a big judgment, they're not going to get that
right.
sort of money.
I mean, it could force some people to bankruptcy or whatever, I guess, but
Right. I think we might see some details of the settlement that haven't been disclosed yet, but I think basically what we know is what we see is what we get. And it's, to me, there's some debate over whether this was bad enough for Fox to make the whole thing worth it. I think it's really bad for Fox. I mean, $800 million judgment they can afford it, but it's going to hurt.
I mean, the humiliation associated with those emails, with those recordings, et cetera, that really was rough. So that was a body blow. The facts are a body blow. To hear Murdoch talk about the fact that he didn't buy into all this crap either, it was quite a couple of months of revelations, and then this big number on top of it. Yeah, I mean, it's hard to see it as anything but a victory. But the fact that they continue on and that they can write that check, yeah, Michael, it's an extraordinary thing. Last thing I'll ask you, and then I do want to get to San Francisco, is do you think that there's a halo effect from this and from this judgment and settlement? Wasn't really a judgment, but it was a judgment on the part of Fox that they weren't going to get prevail at trial. They didn't want to go to trial anyway. They decided to write the check. Will they change the way they handle information on that? No, you don't think it's going to have any effect?
Well, they may be a little bit more. They may be a little bit more careful about what they commit to emails.
I see.
So that But I doubt, and maybe the next time a situation like this rolls around, they may be a little bit more circumspect about what they say on the air, and maybe they'll be more careful. Maria Bartiromo, would say, yeah, everybody knows that, the election was crooked. She might say, Sidney Powell, why don't you tell us what you think, and instead of basically saying this stuff on their own dime, which is what was going on with Bartiromo and, Tucker and Hannity, and
Sure.
the whole rogues gallery
I
over
mean,
there.
they realized that
Their
they,
lawyers may say,
yeah,
"Don't say it that way."
right, right. I mean, they were really throwing a heat. They may not be able to throw that anymore. You did a column.
But I think the bottom
Yeah,
line is, look, if you still believe that Fox News is a news channel, then basically you ought to be in some sort of a home.
right, right. Well, I mean, it's, if if you're in the choir and you want to be preached to, that's what we do
Yeah,
now, right?
some people do. Yeah.
Um, the story that came out of the Bay Area in San Francisco of Bob Lee's knifing and his murder. I wonder if you could speak to that. I love that you did a column on this. You made the point that we made on the air, which was, wow, people are really way, way, way jumping to conclusions on this thing. And it was an easy conclusion to jump to, that it was some rando situation in a decaying city, where liberal, progressive. And there is some truth to that predicament in San Francisco. But what happened was everybody jumped to the wrong conclusion.
Right. Well, and it was they were even wronger than we had reason to believe. Look, I can't prove this because I don't have the emails to prove it. But the very day that this happened, there was this narrative out there that dates back, really a year, maybe more, that San Francisco's turned into this really dangerous place. And part of the narrative comes from from Republicans who say, here's the most progressive city in the country, and it's run by Democrats, and it's a hellhole, and people are being killed and attacked and murdered, and robberies and burglaries are out of control. So there's this sort of standard narrative, and I don't live in San Francisco. It's been a while since I've been there, so I can't say what's in the eyeballs of San Franciscans and visitors. But the moment that this was a very high profile murder. Bob Lee is very well known, and if you didn't know who he was, you learned very quickly because with so much coverage of this case. And the very first day, I sort of said to my editors, or our editors, I wasn't complaining, but I was observing. I was saying, we're writing as though this is, a pointer to this narrative. And I said, what makes us think that it wasn't something very different? I mean, why was he in this neighborhood in the middle of the night? He didn't live in San Francisco. What was he doing there? I said, I'm not blaming the victim, but I was saying, you know, there's a lot we don't know about this. We should not run off and assume that it was street crime. And as we all know, in the fullness of time, it transpired that it was not a street crime. It was basically a dispute between Bob Lee, and if I understand correctly, at least the allegation is the dispute between Bob Lee and somebody he knew, and it started out as a dispute over Bob Lee's relationship with this guy's sister, that basically escalated into a violent encounter. And what I wrote, actually, I guess the piece ran online and in the paper this morning, is that the truth of the matter is that if that is really what happened, as the allegation is, then this actually did correspond to what we know about most violent crime, everywhere in the US, which is that the vast majority of these cases take place between people who know each other, not random strangers. And I went further and I said, the, the the assertion that there's a lot of random mayhem out there that's a threat to normal to people just going about their business is a long-standing uh, picture of life that's not accurate, and that has basically allowed law enforcement agencies, your local police, to set themselves up as the bulwark between you, the citizen, and this wild world out there in which, if you walk out your door, you're liable to get slaughtered. And that's why we have SWAT teams and military equipment and surveillance uh, uh, teams in the local police and all this stuff that doesn't actually reduce crime, but may promote it and gives police a feeling of superiority and imperviousness that actually is not adding to public safety. So I looked at it, the trend over the years has been for police to create this image of life when, in fact, violent crime has been coming down fairly sharply over the last couple of decades. Um, Violent encounters down by 30 or 40%, murders down by even more. In San Francisco, if you look at the actual figures, is one of the safest cities in the country.
I was saying this before your column, and I love that you pointed it out because statistically, violent crime just isn't the problem that we sense it to be in the city. And of course, that Bob Lee thing just vaulted it to another level and amplified it when the realities are something. And now, what we did say was, don't leave your stuff in your car in San Francisco. I mean, they will, your stuff is going to get ripped off. I mean, it's pretty crazy. And there was another narrative.
There was a joke that David Brenner used to crack when, at a time in New York City when there was a garbage strike and garbage was, piling up on the streets. And he said, I know how to get rid of your garbage. Just wrap it up, in gift wrap and leave it in the back of your car and park your car on 8th Avenue and it'll be gone.
That's about where we are.
But that's what the image of disorder in San Francisco and other cities basically stems from the fact that we do see a lot of less than salubrious conditions on the street. Homelessness.
Yeah.
Homelessness. Drug use, what have you, and people tend to basically take their cues from that and say, well, there are these homeless encampments, there are crazy people walking up and down the street
Right.
on drugs or alcoholics.
There's a sense of an unbridled lawlessness, to be honest, in San Francisco and in other major cities. It's as a result of some of these things that you're talking about. This is an interesting point, and I want you to follow this, Michael. Maybe we can talk about it. But J.E. Blake says this. They literally just closed the flagship Whole Foods because they can't keep employees safe in San Francisco. The danger isn't a narrative, it's a fact. Now, before you say anything, that is one of the things they said. But I want to ask you, Hiltzik, do you think there's an element of the Whole Foods closing that's not related to that articulated reason, but it's the cover they're using to close that Whole Foods location?
Yeah, I think there's a lot more that I would want to know about this. And we've already seen, there was a panic in San Francisco a year or so ago, maybe, during the pandemic, where Walgreens, I think it was closing storefronts left and right, and basically attributing it to crime, shoplifting, what have you. And it turned out that was basically a lot of hooey. And what they were actually doing was closing locations that were not living up to expectations in terms of business revenues. And Walgreens, in fact, has acknowledged, its CEO at a conference said, well, we may have overstated the safety aspect of that, which tells you that he's probably understating how much he overstated it. So look,
Anyway, this Whole Foods might have an element of that too. I don't know.
It might be. We don't know. I mean, if I understand correctly, this was a store that was open for a year. Who knows whether Whole Foods realized that it's in the wrong place,
Right.
or the neighborhood just can't support it, or what have you. I think
there are
you
other
assume
elements.
that it was about crime is to make a leap that we don't have a right to make quite yet.
You can read him in the LA Times, see him when he's kind enough to be with us. He's usually very kind to be with us. You answer
Anytime.
the bat beam usually when we put it up. He's the Pulitzer Prize winner. Find him on Twitter at Hiltzik M. Very good handle for him because he is M. Hiltzik. Michael Hiltzik. Thank you, Michael Hiltzik. Hi, it's Mark, and I thought that was great. Hit the notification bell. You'll know whenever there's a new video being dropped, and please subscribe to our channel to help us save the universe.